Hello everybody, nighttime video today, and today I'm going to be talking about Adam and Eve and about whether we have interpreted it correctly. Now, this is part of my look at having more videos, more like what people want to look at, and I know that my Atlantis video is very popular, so I wanted to look at this kind of thing. So I'm starting with an Adam and Eve one. Now, I'm going to start off by saying that I'm not trying to say the Bible is wrong, or the Quran, who also has Adam and Eve, or any of the Jewish texts that talk about Adam and Eve, or anybody else that believes that Adam and Eve are the first two people. I'm not saying that they're wrong. What I'm saying is that we might have misunderstood them, and that perhaps over the centuries and until we got to the Bible in its present day, we may have had a little bit of a misunderstanding as to what they really are. Now, my first hint of this: what does Adam mean? Adam means red, or red-haired. In other words, Adam had red hair. Now, I've talked to people about this, and they've said, oh yeah, look, that's because he was made from the red dirt. Nothing to worry about that. And I said, well, why then isn't Eve also a red name, a red-haired name, such as Scarlet? Why isn't it Adam and Scarlet? Oh, no, because Eve was made from his rib. Therefore, it shouldn't be Adam and Scarlet. It should be Adam and the word for rib. Now, the word for rib in Hebrew is Selah. So therefore, it should be Adam and Selena, or Adam and Selene. But it's not Adam and Selene. It's Adam and Eve. How did that come to be? Eve means life. What's going on here? Why not call her Selene? If she was made from a rib, she should be called Selene or Selena or something along those lines. What is going on here? Now, that's my first little hint that we may have misunderstood it. Now, of course, it could be that in the original text it was Adam and Selene or Adam and Selena, and then she became Eve to mean life. But that doesn't really answer the question. Now, looking at another little bit of a hint that we may have got a bit confused is the existence of Lilith. Now, I've read people, particularly on Wikipedia, who claim that Lilith is just a fictional invention. It's not mythology, it's not in any religious text. That's just not true. Lilith, now I'll just explain the story of Lilith, at least the best understanding that I have of it. So Lilith was the first human. She was created from the red dirt. So Lilith literally translates to night monster. I doubt that was her original name. As I've said before, perhaps her name would have been Scarlet, but that they later changed her to be Lilith. I'm going to get into that a bit more later. But Lilith, suffice to say, was the first human. She was created out of the dirt. She was the only one there for a little while, talking along to God, saying, yeah, this is great. Love being the first human. And then God decided to create Adam. So perhaps she was called Scarlet. I'm just going to put that one out there. And then later changed her name to Lilith when certain things happened. But anyway, so then Adam was created by God to be her husband, her companion. Now they lay together, they had sex, presumably. That's what that means. But God wanted them to get married. And Lilith was like, no, I don't want to marry him. There were only two humans in the world, and yet Lilith didn't want to marry the only other human. So what happened was they had a bit of an argument. And Lilith was going, well, I want him to be a bit more like this or a bit more like that, or have another go and get me a different man, or something along those lines. And what God went and did was he said, well, Adam, give me your rib and I'll make someone who's subservient, who again I think was probably called Selena originally. We'll get into why that name got changed to Eve. Again, that's a bit later. So it was probably, I think Adam was his real name, but that we probably had Scarlet, who became Lilith, and then Selena, or Selene, who became Eve. But we'll get into that later. But anyway, so Eve ended up being subservient. She loved Adam. They got married. and so forth. And then Lilith, so angry about this, she was kicked out of the garden, hadn't even done anything wrong, except for reject Adam. That's all she'd done wrong. A bit unfair, she'd kicked out of the Garden of Eden when she hadn't even really done anything wrong. Really unfair there. Naughty God. And so then Lilith went off and found the demons. Now this is a little bit of a strange one. These demons were not fallen angels. These were demons, independent of the angels. And in fact it seems as if they may have been rivals of God, at the same level as God, perhaps a little bit below, but rivals. So she met with them outside of the Garden of Eden, and she begat with them, and she had babies. It seems as if when you do that with a demon, you just produce lots of babies all really quickly, because she somehow managed to have 1 billion babies. And God went there and went, "What are you doing?" And so then she went there, this is Lilith, and transformed herself into a snake, or a snake-like creature. And then, with the benefit of the demons who she'd befriended and had all these sexy times with them, and she then tempted Eve to eat from apple from the tree of knowledge, which of course got her kicked out of the Garden of Eden. So in other words, that's all Lilith's fault. Lilith, pretty bad person, not only lay with demons and then tricked Eve into doing that and so forth. And on top of that, didn't just stop there. Lilith then went to Lucifer and tempted him to join her. So in this version, we actually have Lilith doing all of that as well. So she made Lucifer turn, and other angels too. There were more fallen angels, and then they eventually uprose. On top of that, Lilith was also the world's first vampire. She was what they called a succubus, which is basically another name for a vampire. So she went and, as a vampire, seduced men, and if they were successfully seduced, they became incubi, or incubus. They were, on her side, they were her vampires. They were her male vampires. Female vampires were succubus, male vampires were incubus. And she, of course, had her own children as well. They were called Lilin. All this sort of stuff. And on top of that, it doesn't even stop there. Lilith also ate babies, human babies. So if the men refused to be seduced by her, she would eat their babies. And we called that SIDS, sudden infant death syndrome, was all because of her. So Lilith did a lot of stuff. So why are we ignoring Lilith? And I've gone on about this in other things. It's really bad that we're ignoring her. And this is not just some fictional thing. This is all over different mythology, not just in Christianity, but all different related religions. There are statues to Lilith. There's all sorts of stuff. This is not just somebody's little book that they sold. This is serious things. Now, why do we have that story? And then we turn around and say Adam and Eve were the first two. Well, according to this story, first came Lilith, then Adam, then Eve. But the one reason to remove it, of course, is because it makes us look bad. That we had this one who did nothing wrong, was kicked out of the Garden of Eden and so forth. It also sort of says, well, this is a very patriarchal society because we've basically said women can't be independent. But let's go a little bit deeper to that, because this also puts into question as to whether Adam and Eve really were the first two. And if we go back to Sumer, now Sumer, you may know, that's where Iraq is currently, and it's around about that area. It's a little bit different place to Israel, but fairly close. Now, Sumer was, according to their own tradition, they were around 500,000 years ago, and they called themselves Shinar, which means black-headed people. And then they say that they actually worshipped Uzmagul, which was a world dragon, a dragon so big that it could pick the world up in one of its claws, the entire Earth. So it never came to Earth, but it had what they called Anunnaki, which are basically giants, or giant humans-like people, and Igigi, which were regular dragons, and that those two were essentially our angels. And what they did was that they liked to mine gold, and they got the Igigi were mining the gold, so the dragons were mining it, and then they created So essentially an Anunnaki were a little bit above the Igigi, but not by much. And they created a new type of humans, which they called Adamu, or Adamu, one letter different. And these people had red hair. And when we actually look back on it, that's actually around about the time that the Neanderthals came around, or what we today called Neanderthals. Adamu were Neanderthals. Shinar were Homo sapiens. So essentially, what we're talking about with Adamu is not a person, it's a new species, and that species is the Neanderthals. So when we're talking about Adam and Eve, we're not actually talking about two people. We're talking about Adamu and the Eve, or birth of the Adamu. So we're actually talking about the Eve of the Adamu, the life of the Adamu, the birth of the Adamu, and that's what we're talking about. And of course, when that happened, according to their stories, according to the Sumerian stories, the Igigi eventually freed the Adamu, who then bred with humans, or bred with the Shinar. And we know biologically that's actually true, because we know that Homo sapiens and Neanderthals lived side by side all around the world, and today most current humans are a combination of Homo sapiens and Adamu, and in many ways it made us stronger. So in other words, what that story is telling us is not the first humans. It's telling us actually the first Neanderthals, which made us stronger. And perhaps because for a little while that story was talking to Neanderthals, and Neanderthals were still around till at least 60,000 years ago, possibly as early as 10,000 years ago when we had the Great Flood. We definitely had the Great Flood, by the way. It's recorded in Sumerian tradition as being when the earth became too noisy, and one of the Anunnaki created it to limit the population. And so they actually said that the world's population was around 30 to 35 billion. It's currently only 7 or 7.7, and that it reduced down to about 400 million afterwards. We actually know it really did reduce down to 400 million. Now, why do we say, therefore, that the world is only 6,000 years old? Well, simple. That's how old Sumer was. That's how old the Hebrew tradition is. Now, Sumer, they say they were 500,000 years old. I don't know either way. Humans were certainly around for 7 million years. So it's not unbelievable. Anyway, that's it for my story there. Hope that helped people out. Bye-bye now.